Hi, this is Eli Kranzberg, and welcome to this series on Studio 1.6. We're going to be taking a fresh look from the ground up, and for those of you who've worked with earlier versions of Studio One, you're going to notice some new improved features starting right here with the Start page. Now, when you first launch Studio One, this is the page that comes up by default, and I say by default because it can be changed for something else to happen. But this page is the central location for where you manage all your documents and device configuration and artist profile, and you get a news feed. And we have three basic types of documents that we work with in Studio One. We have songs, you'll see them here, and this is what we use to create, write, compose, and edit music. We have projects, and this is what we use for mastering, to string together finished mixes to master them for a CD or an album. And then we have shows, which are designed for live use, for triggering synths live and using backing tracks or playing live instruments with effects and managing set lists and so on for live shows. And we'll be spending most of this series in the song format where we create music. And of course, we have a recent files area here. Now, producers or mixing engineers working with different artists and clients can now, new in Studio One, create and manage separate artist profiles, and they're stored in an artist profile preset. And we get to that area here. And you can do all this from the Start page, but you can also go in once you're within Studio One past the Start page and edit these, but this is a good place to start. So I'm going to create a profile for myself. I'm just going to drag and drop a picture on there, and it's asking me if I want to resize it, and I'll go yes, and it's got my name because that's who this version is registered to. And I'm going to type in genre. It's going to type in jazz and pop. And then we can optionally link to a website. Now here, I've got this X if I want to get rid of that and remove the image. And I got this drop-down menu, which shows me where the demos and tutorials are on the hard drive in my user folder, Documents, Studio One, Demos and Tutorials. It's going to click Cancel. But here's the new part where this is the profile I've just created, and I can go Add Artist and then create another profile. Now, the advantage of these artist profiles is that they include the name, genre, and website in the image, but the information is also automatically embedded as ID3 tags when we export a mixdown, when we're exporting to any of the compressed audio formats like MP3 or MP4 and FLAC, so useful for that metadata. Now, there's also a new restructured new document window here. We use this to open existing projects from here if they're not in the recent files list. And here's a new join button for connecting with PreSonus Sphere and collaborating with other users. Now, when we press new, we're going to get the new smart templates that are provided in Studio 1.6, and they're great for essential workflows like basic recording, mixing stems, mastering an album, or you can simply play an instrument, or you can also use them for creating a podcast or preparing or rehearsing and performing a live show. And we have user templates and the factory smart templates. So these are completely unique in the way that they combine a basic set of pre-configured tracks and channels with a customized user interface. And that's also new in Studio 1.6, where you can customize what's visible. And it'll also even automatically download required content. And there's even step-by-step tutorials, and some of them like this, you'll see include a drop zone for importing files. So that will open up a basic Studio One song. This will open up a project for mastering. This will open up a show. And here's just to play right away. It'll call up a synth, and again, download content if necessary. I'm just going to click OK. I'm not going to go through all the fields, but just to show you, I can right away get a tutorial showing me important areas. It's highlighting, click there to open up the instrument. Just a step-by-step simple tutorial. Click there to change the preset on the instrument. Check there to make sure your external device is configured properly. And you can import backing tracks, and you're ready to play. And so on. I'm just going to hit Command W to close the document without saving anything. We're back to the Start page. Now here, another new feature in recent files, we can pin these if we want to get specific files pinned to the top so that they always appear here. And this is great when you have a long list. And of course, right now I don't, so it's not critical, but we can pin files. And then we can also create folders to better organize the songs, projects, and shows that we're working on. So welcome to Studio 1.6. In the next video, we're going to continue on the Start page and look at configuring our audio and external devices. The start page is the central location that opens by default, where we manage our documents, configure our devices, set up our artist profile, and also get access to a news feed. And there are three main types of documents we work with in Studio One 6: songs for creating and editing music, projects for mastering, and shows for live performance. And we can now manage multiple artist profiles with artist profile presets that contain information that are embedded as tags when we export mixdowns in any of these compressed formats. And we now also have smart templates for basic workflows, and they contain pre-configured tracks and channels, a customized interface, and they'll even download the content if you haven't already downloaded, and provide some basic tutorial starting points. We'll continue with more in the next video. In this video, I want to look at managing your Studio One content installation and configuring your basic audio and MIDI hardware. Now, there's a new consolidated Studio One installation process available in Studio One 6, and we get to it from under the Studio One menu on top here. And if we go down to Studio One installation, we have a kind of revised, easier to work menu here, where we can search and filter for the content that's available, and we have available updates there and installed content there, and available downloads and so on. And it's simple a matter of clicking what you want or don't want, and you can filter here and then just click install from, select all, different install options, and so on. And you can also alternatively install files directly from your My PreSonus account page. Now, we also need to set up our audio hardware, and we can get to it directly from the start page, configure audio device, and this opens up the preferences window brought up with the tab for audio setup. I'm just going to close it just to show you that you can also get to it from under Studio One preferences, and we have these tabs over here. So first thing is to make sure that your audio device is recognized and selected, and you'll see a list of your available hardware connected to your studio. Now, if it's not appearing here, you'll need to go to the Audio MIDI Setup app in your Mac OS and make sure you have the proper drivers installed and that your actual operating system on the computer is recognizing it. So from here, it's a simple matter of choosing the device that you want to be using for playback, basically for output and input, and usually they're the same, but not necessarily. And here we have the device block size, and the general rule of thumb here is the lower you have this, the lower or less latency you're going to encounter. Latency meaning the time from when you, let's say, speak into your mic or play your guitar or hit your keyboard until you hear the sound back. So lower values are better for latency, but they're also more taxing on your computer. Higher values are less taxing, but you'll hear latency. So generally when you're recording and working, you want to have as low a latency as you can. And when you're mixing, you can increase it if necessary to get more power from your computer. We can set the sample rate here, and that's going to be based on your audio hardware for what's available. And you get a simple readout of the input latency and output latency generated by these buffer settings. And you can see if I increase this here, let's say 512, these numbers will go up. So I'm going to keep it at 128. I can even go down to 64, and it'll probably be fine where I get really imperceptible latency. Now here on the second page, we have audio dropout protection, which is kind of an advanced native low latency monitoring system. And with this, basically the tasks of audio playback and monitoring of audio inputs and virtual instruments are handled as separate processes. So it's a way of getting the least latency possible when you're using lower buffer sizes. It uses its own buffer for playback and processing of audio tracks, and we can change the settings here and it'll change this process size. And as this goes up, you'll see this little low latency icon here, meaning that low latency monitoring for instruments is available, and you can turn it on or off here, and we can turn it on or off separately within the console, within Studio One songs, but that's a separate thing. Just for the basic setup, we set the dropout protection here. And again, the higher this goes, the greater the latency is, but you can also optionally enable the low latency mode to minimize that. And enabling plugin nap is another way to minimize the potential for audio dropouts. When audio isn't passing through an actual plugin, it reduces the resources that are needed. So it's good to leave that on by default, and you can selectively enable or disable it for individual plugins if you want to within plugin manager. So that's a basic audio setup. Now let's look at external devices. I happen to have a Novation Impulse keyboard connected, and that's what's being used. And I'm just going to remove it and show you how to create it from scratch. So I'm going to go add a new one, and you get a list of available devices. So look for your manufacturer and your device, and hopefully it'll be there. In my case, there's no category for Novation, so I have to create it from new. So I'm going to go new keyboard, and this is for when it's a MIDI keyboard controller and it's not an actual instrument that's generating sound. And device model, again, and manufacturer and name. So I'm going to just type in Novation and my device name. I'll call it that just so we can identify it. And here we can selectively enable or disable whatever MIDI channels we want used, and they're all on by default. You can turn them all off there and just select the ones you need. I'm going to leave them all on. Generally, I only use one channel, but in case I'm using some multi-timbral instruments and I want to access some other channels, I want to leave it on. And receive from, and here's where you choose the keyboard that's connected to your system. And again, if it's not appearing here, you'll need to go to the audio MIDI setup and make sure you have the proper drivers installed so that it's recognized by your system. So this is my Impulse keyboard, and there's also a MIDI input on it, and I'm not using that, so I want it to receive from that. And I can filter out any of these messages if I want, and mine actually leaks some pitch bend information. It's something I have to get repaired, but for now I'm going to filter that out just so we don't get distracted by random pitch bend. And send to, and in this case I want none because I want it to just trigger my software instruments, but we can actually route it here to other hardware if we want to. Enable split channels if you want to create separate instrument track inputs for each MIDI channel on your keyboard. I'm going to leave that off. And if you're working with multiple devices, you can enable one to be the default instrument input, so it's set up by default when you create new instruments. And there's also MIDI polyphonic expression that's now available. You can enable that if you're using an MPE-enabled keyboard, which the Novation Impulse isn't. And just to finish up with the start page, here you can optionally sign out or into your MyPreSonus account and Sphere. And here you can monitor transfers that are in progress when you're downloading content. This is for organizing macros, which is a more advanced feature we'll look at later in the series. And here you can manage your SoundCloud information for the SoundCloud section here. So you can now manage your content and downloads all from one location in the Studio One installation menu item from the application menu in the upper left. Configure your audio hardware right on the start page or in the preferences window. And in there, you'll have the audio dropout protection, which is an advanced feature for native low latency monitoring. And it's useful to enable the low latency monitoring option when it's available. It'll bypass effects plugins in the audio path that have greater than 3 milliseconds of latency, but you can also selectively exclude any individual plugins from that if you want. And you also configure your external MIDI devices from the start page or in the preferences window. We'll continue with more in the next video. A lot of us are using audio interfaces with multiple inputs and outputs, and I want to look at setting that up in this video. And to start with, I want to create a song, and I'm going to start with one of the new smart templates, and let's go with the Play Now smart template, where it'll automatically generate a piano for us, and we looked at that last time. But let's look at this window a little more closely so we can select what we want here, and of course we can select from different templates. But the first thing is to give it a name, and then a location, and it'll store this in the default location on your hard drive in your user folder, Documents, Studio One Songs, or click there and you can get a file selector to choose where you want it. And then we can choose the sample rate, and again, this is based on what's available for your audio hardware, and several other settings. The bit depth, time base, if we want to work in bars or seconds, frames. I'm going to work in bars for now. The length, which can be changed, so it doesn't matter. We can even set a default tempo anywhere you want, but this can all be changed. The default time signature and key signature. And this is important. Stretching audio files to tempo can be enabled or disabled, and all of these can be changed after the fact. So these are just initial starting settings to work with. And when you're importing audio, it'll conform it to the tempo with this enabled. And then this, for Studio One users of earlier versions, will notice this is new. We have different customization templates that are available, so we can optionally enable or disable that. And because it's a smart template, it's setting up the basic configuration for us, and we'll look at that probably in another video. But let me leave that on for now and set this up. And now we have our instrument. I'm just going to close this with the tutorial and we can play it. But what I want to get to is under the song menu. First, though, just to take a quick look under View, we have the new customization, Edit Customizations, and these are the different sets of controls that are available. If I go to Complete, for example, you'll see some things changed up here and in the inspector, which is hidden, and we'll get to all this. But I just wanted to show you where this is, and we can edit the customization there. But let's just go back to Basic for now. So under Song, what I want to go to is Song Setup. And here we have the general information that we set when we created it, and we can change any of this here. And we have the meta information for the artist profile. I can add any or all of this information if I want, and then I can easily store it and update the profile. And this is what I want to get to, is the audio I/O setup. So it's defaulted to 2 inputs and 1 pair of outputs, and this interface has a lot more. There's 8 or 10 actually analog inputs, and then there's ADAT and so on. You can even see my voice. I'm plugged into input 1. You can see it triggering here. But I want to add more of the inputs and outputs so they'll be available within my Studio One songs. So we have a matrix here of hardware inputs and software routing, and generally it's a 1-to-1 match. There's ways of creating very sophisticated, complex routings, but let's stick with the basics for now. I'm going to go add mono. Adding a 3rd input in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'll go with that for now. Now you can name these. Like, for example, I happen to have my input 3 set up as my overhead drum mic on the left, and then that one's the overhead right. I'm just going to name them quickly. I'm just hitting Tab to move back and forth. For example, now here, let's make this window a bit bigger so we can see it all. We can click to assign the routing wherever we want, but in this case, I want this one to be assigned to analog 3. I want this one to be assigned to analog 4. And by naming them, I'll see these names in my list within the tracks within Studio One, which is a bit more useful to me than just seeing input 3, input 4, and so on. So with that done, I'm going to click in these. They're already by default lined up with the default 1-to-1 assignment. And I'm just going to hit Apply, and that'll sort of enable them all. And we're good to go. Now I can do the same thing for the outputs, where I've got my main outputs, and I can add, in this case, I'm going to add stereo outputs. And I don't need to add that many, but I'm using these to feed my headphones. And this is important when you're creating headphone mixes. And I actually don't even need 3. Now, if you're running, let's say, a surround setup, you might want to enable them all and name them, rear, side, center, and so on. But for that, I'm just going to hit Remove there, and I'm just left with the basics that I'm using. And again, I'm going to hit Apply to enable them. Now, we can add here, and we can add multiple at one time. I did them individually, but you can add multiple channels at once if you're working with huge setups. And you can make this the default, and you can also set the audition output. And I'm going to leave it to main for now for the purposes of our video, but you might want to audition, for example, when you're auditioning loops in the browser or audio files in one of the browsers, for example, you might want to route it somewhere else, but I'm going to leave it at mains. And I can make this the default, which I'm going to do. And it's asking me if I want to make it the default setup, and I'm going to go yes. And we can import or export these audio setups. And I think I'm going to export this because I sometimes do use another audio interface. And just to show you where it's stored, in the users folder under your username, Documents, Studio One, I/O configuration, and I'll click Save, and we're done. We'll continue with more in the next video. Here we are on the start page, and we see that the audio I/O song that I created is now at the top of the recent files. So I'm going to single click that to open it. And I want to take a quick look around the main areas of the interface. So this is the main workspace. We see the bar numbers across the top going from left to right, and that's the time base that you'll recall that we chose. We could see minutes and seconds or frames if you're working with video, but we're working with bars. And we see the tracks and channels lined up along here, and we just have this one default instrument called up, the piano sound. Now, the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the inspector, and we can get to it by hitting F4 on the keyboard, and that'll toggle that side panel open or closed. And we can also hit this I button over here. And this shows a variety of parameters relating to the track that's selected. And if there are events on this track, like if I had recorded some of this MIDI piano, there would possibly be additional settings relating to the event. Now we're seeing a reduced set of parameters here based on, you'll recall that we have this basic set of controls that are available. And I'm going to open it up to customize it. just to show you how this works. We're in the basic set, and we have the different areas that we can include or exclude components from appearing. And there's the inspector, and we're on an instrument track. So if I, let's say, introduce that, you'll see an additional parameter came into effect. And there I've got note effects now and routing. So that's available here for routing for this instrument, for MIDI input in the channel and so on. And they're not in the basic set, but let's say I decide I want to customize it and I want retrospective recording and note effects, but I don't really need routing. I can then save this by clicking this and save it or store it as a user-defined set. And I can rename it, delete, and so on. Or I can revert, and it's got some user-defined versions that are unsaved because I haven't saved them, but I've been experimenting. But let's just stick with the basic for the moment. So that's the inspector, and F4 will toggle it along with that. Now here at the bottom, we see the console view, and we get to that by hitting F3. And that toggles it open or closed. There's a resize handle here. We can resize it like that, and there's different components that we can view or hide. This is a short view, that's a tall view. This is a skinny view, and that's a wide view. Over here, we see different view of the metering going in. And then over here, we see the output channels. You recall I created those two headphones and the main outputs, so we can hide or reveal those there. Here we get external devices, and I have that one keyboard that you'll recall that we set up. I can see it there. Here I get the instruments that are loaded in this song. So far, it's just this one instrument, Presence, that was loaded by default on this track when I called up the Smart template. And then here we have different scenes for storing different snapshots of mixer setups. We'll get to all this later in the series. Groups and channel configurations. There's different views here that we can use and so on. I'm going to hit F3 to hide it. Now the next view is the editor or edit view, and we're going to hit F2 to open that. And here we get a resizable pane at the bottom, and we're looking at score notation. There's different views here. There's the name of my song and my artist profile. These are all just set up by default. There's even a printer view. And we can get to the different edits over here, or editors here. So this is the main piano view. If we had notes here, we can edit note pitch, length, duration, velocity, and so on. We can edit MIDI controllers, pitch bend, aftertouch, and others. Here we have a dedicated drum editor for when we're working with drum kits, and we can edit and create notes and work with drum mappings and so on. And then here's the notation that we looked at originally. And again, there's a little inspector here that updates depending on which pane is selected. So I'm going to hit F2 to close that. Now we can toggle these main views with these buttons over here. Here's Edit, and that'll open and close it, and Mix to open and close the console. And then the browser, which is open by default here, we can toggle that open or close like that. But we can also use the shortcut F5 to open it and close it. And here we have different views. This is a home view where you can jump to these different pages in the browser, or we can get to them by clicking on these tabs. For example, here, instruments, and we can sort by file or folder or vendor name, and there's some settings and so on. And then we have effects plugins that we can, again, sort by vendor, file, or flat list, and different ways of looking at them. These are just visual kind of database view options. And then there's loops that are available. And then we have a file browser to search the volumes on our hard drive for files that we might want to drag and drop and bring in. And then there's an audio pool browser that we're not viewing now. I'm going to drag here and resize and bring that out more. And we get to the pool, and that shows what's used in the song. And currently there's just this one instrument, but we'd see any audio files and or other instruments that are used. And you can access the cloud for PreSonus, Sphere, and Exchange, and then the shop for buying things. And we can get to all of these by shortcuts as well. So F5 will toggle the browser open or close, and it'll open to whatever was the most recently used tab. It's not necessarily the home tab. So F5 toggles the browser to the most recently viewed tab. F6 will jump directly to instruments. F7 goes to effects. F8 goes to loops. F9 goes to files. And F10 goes to the pool. Now at the bottom, we have some transport controls with counters, transport mechanisms, metronome recording settings, time signature, tempo, and so on. And at the top, we have some tools, and then quantizing, snap, nudge, other basic functions. And these can be customized. If I right-click here and go to Customize, I get the customization window. And if I just toggle it for a moment to complete, you'll see that got a lot bigger, and that one did as well. But I'll go back to Basic for the moment. And then we can also align this let's say to the left, so you have more space here, or align it to the right or center, and the default is center, and we can customize here as well. And one last F key to show you, F1 will call up the internal help documentation. I don't have mine installed currently, and I have the option to install it, of course. And one little bonus power user key command I want to show you. Let's say you've got several of these open. I've got, let's say, the browser, the inspector, this, and I want to close them all. I can hit Shift F12 to close everything at once, and that'll reopen them again. It'll toggle it, and just F12 alone will open or toggle any floating windows, and there aren't any currently. All right, if you've hung around this long, I'm going to show you some more power user key commands. Now, F2 we know will open the editor. We can also use this to detach it and then freely resize it as we want. And then we can reattach it using this downward pointing arrow. And once it's detached, we can also pin it so that it'll stay on top. And we can use this to go to full screen mode and then just use escape to revert back. And I'm going to hit X to close it. But the power user tip is F2 will open it. And if we go Command F2, that'll toggle the detached version of it. And that's Control F2 on Windows. Now, same thing works with console view. F3 is the console. We can easily detach it like this, and then we can go full screen if we want. I'm going to hit escape to go back and use that to go back to the docked version. And then we can go Command F3 to toggle the detached version. And that's Control F3 on Windows. So F1 will open the help documentation. F2 opens the editor. And Command or Control on Windows with F2 will toggle the detached version of the editor. F3 opens the console. Command with F3 or Control on Windows toggles the detached version of the console. F4 will open the inspector. F5 to F10, the respective browser views. F12 will toggle floating windows if there are any. And Shift F12 will toggle all the open optional views. I want to go over some navigation functions and commands in this video. Now, this is an important video in that it covers a lot of basic tasks that you're going to be doing routinely. So I'd suggest maybe getting a pencil and paper, writing some of these down, studying them. These are important commands that are useful to have at your fingertips. Now, I'm going to start by bringing a file into the timeline. Let me hit F3 to close up the console, and I'm going to jump to the loops browser here, and I've navigated to a loop that I like, and you can open and close these folders and disclose the subfolders by going inside and so on. And I'm going to click on this one, and I can audition it here. And I'm going to hit stop. It's going to conform to the tempo because of the stretch files function that I have in this smart template. And I'm just going to take this and drag it to an empty space in the timeline. Just drop it, let's say right there at bar 5. So first thing I want to show you is that we can single click in the timeline here, and that'll position the playback cursor. So I'm clicking there and so on. And it's rounding off to the nearest beats due to the snap setting. But we'll look at that in another video. So I'm going to click here to the beginning of bar 5, and I can hit the space bar to toggle playback. And we're hearing the click. I think I'm going to turn that off. This metronome icon here, and I'll hit spacebar again. So spacebar will toggle playback, stopping and starting from wherever this playback cursor is. Now, another thing I can do is simply double click in the timeline here, and it'll position the cursor and start playback from there. Spacebar to stop, double click, starts playback from wherever I click. I'll double click here, hit spacebar, and it stops. Now, I'm just going to zoom a little bit by positioning my cursor in the timeline and dragging up and down, and that'll zoom in and out. There's other zoom commands we'll look at, but I just want to use this one for the moment. Now we have dedicated start and stop commands. I can use the enter key to start playback on the numeric keypad, and right now the cursor is in the middle here, so it's going to start from there. Hit 0, and that'll stop playback. Enter, and 0. So those are dedicated stop and start commands. I'm going to hit F4 to open the inspector and just bring this fader down a bit. We don't really need to hear the music as loud. This is more about navigation. Now, it's useful to be able to move this playback cursor by a bar, forward or backward. And to go forward by a bar, we use Shift with the plus key on the numeric keypad. So as I hit that, you'll see it's going forward and rounding to the bar. And we can use Shift with minus on the numeric keypad to go backwards by a bar. So even if I position in the middle and go back with Shift minus, it'll position to the beginning or ends of the next or previous bars. So here I am at the beginning of this, and I can hit spacebar. Spacebar again will stop. Now we can forward fast or fast rewind using those same functions without the Shift key. So if I'm on the numeric keypad, I can just use the plus button and I can keep my finger on it and it'll keep fast forwarding, or the minus button. As long as I keep my finger down, it'll go fast forward or fast rewind and just stop wherever I release my finger. So again, with Shift, we can then do it in even bar increments, which if you're working with music is usually pretty useful. Now let's say I want to loop a selection. First of all, I can click on this event to select it. Let me click away and it's unselected. You'll see the difference in the shading. And with it clicked, I can loop the selection. And to loop the selection, I hit Shift P and you'll see this little loop icon that's become enabled that corresponds to the length of this selection. Now, a selection can also be a portion of the waveform. I'm just going to click here and drag to zoom in again a little bit so we can get more nuanced. And with this crosshair tool, let's say I select that. I can go Shift P, and it's now going to set the loop range to correspond to the selection, which is different than the entire event. Again, I'll select this little part and go Shift P, and now it's going to loop that. Now we can also loop a selection like that, but snapped or rounded to the bar. And to do that, we just hit P. So with this same selection, if I hit P, it's going to round this to the whole bar, even though the selection is just that little bit of the bar. I'll select this little bit here and hit P, and it's going to round it to that whole bar. And this is a 2-bar loop. Now we can toggle the loop on or off. You'll see it's kind of shaded light gray. We can toggle it on or off with this button here, and you'll see it becomes active. Or we can use the / on the numeric keypad, which is much quicker. So now when I hit playback, it's going to loop that one area. Now if I hit playback, it's going to start from here. I've got to position it to the beginning of the loop, so I can single click there, or I can use my rewind key command. But another thing that we can do is go to the start of the loop, and to do that we use 1 on the numeric keypad, and that jumps there. And I can go to the end of the loop by hitting 2. And we'll start there. So let me hit 1 and now hit spacebar to play. And it's looping that 1 bar over and over again. So we looked at positioning the timeline based on bars and based on selections and based on loop ranges. But we can also go to a time position independent of any of them. I'm going to hit Command T, and that's Control T on Windows, and it brings up this box. And let's say I'm going to type in 7 at the beginning and just hit Return for OK. It's going to position at bar 7. Command T, let's say I'm going to type in 8 and then hit Tab to go to the next field and type in 3, and then I'll hit Return or Enter again to dismiss the box. And it jumps to bar 8, beat 3. And you can get nuanced down to the subdivision finer than that. So I'm going to go Command T again to bring it up, and I'll type in 9, tab, 2, tab, let's say 2 again. Hit Enter, and now it's going to bar 9, beat 2, the second subdivision, second 16th note between the second beat and third beat. So we can position the cursor with very fine control like that. Now we can always go back to the beginning of the song, hitting the period button on the numeric keypad, and there I've just positioned it right back to bar 1. And we can always locate to the beginning of a selection using L. So you'll see here, and I'm using my scroll wheel, my mouse scroll wheel horizontally to scroll like that, by the way. So we have this little selection, and if I want to position to the beginning of the selection, I can just hit L, and there it's located to the beginning. Now, let's say I have multiple events. I'm just going to click in the background to deselect. I'm going to Option click and drag this to create duplicates of it. So I've got, let's say, 3 versions of this now. And again, I'm going to zoom the timeline so we can see them all in one screen like that. I can go to the next and previous event. So right now I'm here, and if I want to go to the next event, I can go Shift, Alt, or Option N for next. And it's jumping to the next ones, and I can go back using Shift, Option, and B for back. So we can go to next and previous events like that. So those are some basic navigation functions. I want to do a review, and I suggest you take some time and really practice them and get them under your fingertips. All right, the most basic functions: single click in the timeline to position the playback cursor. Double click in the timeline will position the cursor and start playback at the same time. Use the space bar to stop and start playback, or use the Enter key for a dedicated start command, or the 0 key on the numeric keypad for a dedicated stop command. And then basic moving of the playback cursor along the timeline. Rewind 1 bar at a time using Shift with the minus key on the numeric keypad. Move the playback cursor forward 1 bar at a time using Shift with the plus key on the numeric keypad. And keep your finger down on the minus key with no modifier for a fast rewind, or on the plus key on the numeric keypad for a fast forward. Now next are loop-based commands. We can loop a selection using Shift-P, and that can be either clicking on an event to select the whole event, or clicking a portion of the event by clicking and dragging within it. And then we can round that off to the bar by simply using P without the modifier. We can turn the actual looping function on and off with the / key on the numeric keypad. And we can position the playback cursor to the beginning of a loop by using 1 on the numeric keypad, or the end of the loop by using 2 on the numeric keypad. More positioning commands. We can hit Command T or Control T to bring up the Go To Time box, where we can type in a specific location to position the playback cursor. We can go to the beginning of the song by using period on the numeric keypad. We can locate to the beginning of a selection using L, or we can go to the next event using Shift-Alt-N, or a previous event in the timeline using Shift-Alt-B. We'll continue with more in the next video. Now I want to create a new project. I'm going to click the plus button, and it's defaulting to the factory default user location, but I want to save my songs to my own dedicated hard drive that I have. I want to change this. Now I can click here and navigate and change, but I don't want to do that each time. I want to set it so that this comes up to my new preferred default location. So I'm going to hit cancel, and I'm going to hit Command, to bring up the preferences. And then under locations here, we have for user data, we can set the default location. So I'm going to set it. And in this case, I have my Studio 1.6 explained folder that I'm working on, and I'm just going to set it to this folder for now. So now when I click OK and I go back to create a new song, we're going to see that it's now defaulting to that location. So again, I'm just going to hit cancel for a moment, and I want to create a folder in there to keep my songs. So I've got my recent files here, and I'm going to, clear them. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go remove from recent list, but I'm going to right click in the background and go clear recent files. So they're all cleared now. So in songs here, which is what I'm going to be working in, I'm going to create a new folder, and let's name it. And we see it there, of course. And if I right click, I can go show in Finder, and let's see where it's put it. It's in this new location that I just set in my audio drive in the Studio 1.6 explained folder, and there's a songs subfolder for this, and now I have Studio 1.6 explained songs. So I can now create new songs and have them located there. So I'm going to click plus, and we have all of these new smart templates that we can choose from, and user templates that we can save on our own. But I'm just going to go with the record and mix new Studio One song. This is the equivalent of starting an empty song like we used to have in the older versions of Studio One. So I'm going to give it a name to correspond with this video, and it's already in the right location. We can see it's in this Studio One explained songs. I'm just going to navigate right to there, and I'm going to leave the sample right like that. And let's set the tempo. Maybe I'll put it at 94 beats per minute, and I'll just leave everything else as is. I can even drag and drop files in here, and I'm not going to use any customization for the moment. And let's just click OK. So there we have an empty song with no tracks. Now, I want to draw your attention to one other preference just regarding starting up and creating new songs. Again, Command, comma to bring up the preferences. And under General, I mentioned in, I think it was the first video, that when Studio One starts, by default, we get that start window. And that's do nothing, meaning the start window comes up. But we do have the option of opening the most recently used song or project or show, or opening a default song, or creating a new one. So we do have those options. Just wanted to point that out. Now, on the Locations tab, a couple of more settings I want to explain to you. Enable autosave, defaults to every 5 minutes. You can set a user-defined time in there, but 5 minutes is fine with me, and that does exactly what it says. It'll autosave. So in case of a crash or you forget to save, your data is there. And I also like to enable this ask to copy external files when saving documents. So if I import any audio into here, it'll reference the audio in its original location unless I have this enabled, and then it'll copy it to a media folder associated with this song. We'll continue with more in the next video. So we've got an empty song here, and the first thing we want to do is add a track. Now there's a few different ways of doing it. The easiest way is to use the shortcut T for add tracks. So I'm going to hit T, and it brings up this add tracks window. I'm just going to hit cancel for a moment, just to show you that we can also right-click here on the left in the track list and go add tracks. That'll bring up the same window. Again, escape will cancel it. Or under the track menu here, add tracks. So here we have a new kind of organization for older Studio One users. I'm going to start by creating an instrument track. So we can set the name that we want to call it. We can create as many tracks as we want. We can color it manually by turning off auto color and clicking here, but I'm just going to leave the auto color on. And we can have the input set to our default input. You recall we set that up. Or if we're using multiple devices, we can set which one specifically we want there. In my case, the default is fine. And if existing instruments are present in the session, we can select those and connect to them. But I'm going to create a new instrument to associate with this track since this is our first one. Now we have something here called Load Track Preset, and this is new in Studio One 6. Track presets store both track and channel parameters. Now, tracks and channels are two separate things in Studio One. Tracks are what we deal with here in the main song page, and they're connected to channels in the console view, and the channel is what controls the volume and the plugin processing and so on. So the track connects to the channel. So track presets store both the track and channel parameters. So it's kind of like taking a snapshot of the current state across the arrangement and in the mixer. Now the track parameters include things like track delay, the time stretch function that we've chosen, follow chords, and any even assigned instrument preset in the case of instruments like this. So I'm going to create a new instrument, and I'm not going to load a track preset. We can click here and it'll bring up a variety of options. And of course, you can create your own, which we're going to look at in a moment. But let me click cancel and just bring that back up. So I'm going to name this again, and I'm going to set this to a new instrument, and I can choose my instrument from here. And if I don't, I can create a track with no instrument and then just drag and drop from here onto it. But I'm going to create it right from here, and I'm going to choose Presence, which is one of the built-in instruments from Studio One. So let me click OK. And now we have this named, and we have the little icon here that I can click on to open the instrument editor, which in this case is Presence. And I'm going to call up a patch that I like. Right now we're not hearing anything, but if I click here, I'm going to go to Basses, and that's one possibility. Or I'm going to just choose this for now and double click to select it, and I'll click this to close it. So let's look at what's happening here. I'm going to hit F3 to open this up, and we see the console view here with the channel. So that's the track and that's the channel. So the channel parameters that are stored with a preset include things like the volume and pan level, any insert effects, maybe any internal routing if I'm using a splitter, and any send assignments, I/O routing in the case of an audio track. These can all be stored, even the name and the color, all be stored as a track preset. So you saw I had the option of loading a track preset when I created the track, but we can also apply them to existing tracks. So I can simply right click here and I can go load track preset, and it'll bring up that box with the different track presets that are available, and I can also drag and drop them from here. In the instruments, I have track presets here, and those are the defaults. And I can even apply a track preset in the console view to a channel. If I right-click here, we have the Apply Track Preset option as well. But I want to create my own. So let's say I'm going to call up an insert effect here. I can click the plus button and type in my name that I want to look for and call up a plugin that way. But I want to show you a new way to do it. Let me just click out of here. We have a new channel overview window. We get to it by clicking this, the channel editor button, and it defaults to this new overview, which provides a single consolidated view of all the channel parameters, including the input controls, inserts, sends, CueMix sends, if they have them set up. And it'll update for selected channels. You can pin it at the top and then just click on different channels and it'll update. So it's a great kind of overview. I'm just going to leave it unpinned for the moment. And here we see the instrument and the routing, the pan, the volume, and so on. So I'm going to call up my insert from here. I can click here to call up a preset effects chain, but I'm just going to click plus, and I'm going to type in Pro EQ. I want to call up the PreSonus Pro EQ, and it's in there, and I can click there, and I get a little graph of it, and I can double click and open the interface, and this is the new updated Pro EQ3. So let's make some settings just for the sake of editing this. Maybe a bit of click. So let's say I'm going to use that. So just for the sake of creating a track preset, I've got that. And again, we can always recall that over there. So what I can do now is just simply take this and drag and drop it into the browser, into my track presets. Let me just name it first. It's a long name, but just for illustrative purposes, I'm going to take that and drag it into the track presets. And now if we look over here, we're going to see Eli's synth-based track preset. So that's available. And of course, I can take this and drag and drop it into one of the subfolders if I want to. Or what I can do is right-click on here and create a new folder within the Instruments folder so I can really manage my own track presets however I want. So to summarize, track presets store both track and channel parameters. And the track parameters that they store include track delay, time stretch, follow chords, and even instrument presets if we're working with instruments. And the channel parameters include everything: volume and pan, inserts, routing, send assignments, name and color. And they can also be applied to existing channels. So for any selected tracks, you can just right-click inside the track header and choose Store Track Preset or Load Track Preset. And we can also store them simply by dragging and dropping into the browser. Tracks have a Load Track Preset in their right-click menu, and channels have the Apply Track Preset option also in their right-click contextual menu. And there's the new Channel Overview window, which provides a single consolidated view of all channel parameters. And it's available as a new tab in the Channel Editor window. It's the default view, and it can be pinned and follows channel selection. We'll continue with more in the next video. Now, before I record my first MIDI part, the bass part, I want to talk about setting up the click and the metronome. We need to have a timing reference to record to so that our performance will line up with the bars and beats. So again, I'm just going to zoom a little bit so we can see more of the timeline here. So I'm going to hit the period key to go back to the beginning, and we can turn the metronome on and off with the shortcut C, and you'll see this little icon here in the toolbar at the bottom. And I can click that as well to toggle it on or off. So I can click this to open up metronome setup where we set the different options available. So let me hit play. This says click and play, and you're going to hear it now. Now with this disabled, we'll only hear it in record, which I generally prefer because when I'm playing back, I don't necessarily need to hear a click. But I'm going to leave it on for the moment so we can look at customizing the sound. Now we have different sounds available for the downbeat of the bar, each beat, and then the different subdivisions. And by default, they're all set to click. But maybe I'm going to change this one. So the downbeat is the click and the rest are the different sound. And if I have offbeat, we can set the level for each of these. Get eighth note subdivisions, and we can set a different sound for that as well if we want. I'm going to leave it off. And when we find settings that we like, we can always store it as a preset and then reload it. So you can have different clicks, maybe different performance, like different setups for that. And we can render it as audio if you want. Now, when we hit C, it turns it on or off, and you'll see the active button turn on and off with that. Or, as I mentioned, you can use this button here. Now, we have pre-count and pre-roll, and these are interesting and important. So let's say I position my playback cursor at bar 4, and I want to start recording there. If I have pre-roll enabled, it's going to start from a certain number of bars back. So maybe I want to start recording, let's say at bar 8, but I want to listen for 2 bars before. I'm going to set this to 2. And now if I hit the record command, which is the asterisk on the numeric keypad, it's going to start from here, but only drop into record here. So if there's any content in the last 2 bars before, we'll be able to hear those. So you hear it there playing back potentially material that could be relevant for me to start recording there, and you see it's recording. I'm going to hit stop, and I didn't play anything, so nothing got captured. Now, pre-count just means that it's going to start recording at the position we have, but instead of playing for a specified number of bars before, it'll just give us the click with the position remaining static there. So let me set this, for example, to 1 bar of pre-count, and now I'll hit the asterisk key for record. Again, I'll hit stop and nothing got captured. So we hear the pre-count of 1 bar, and then it starts playback and recording there. Now we have the option for repeat accent, and if you're working in compound time signatures like 12/8 or 9/8 or something like that, you'll get the accent sound on the logical subdivisions. And we can have click in the pre-count only, which is actually really useful. Once you've got your song underway, you might just need the count in to get you started, but then once you're recording, you may have drums and bass and whatnot happening. You don't really need the click. You can hear the music and go with that. So I actually like that a lot, but I'm going to leave it off for now since I'm going to be starting from scratch. I'm going to leave this on for the moment. Now, there's a couple of useful shortcuts that can help you avoid having to open this window at all. Once you've got your sounds set up here, and you can just leave it like that, you can hit Shift-C, and that'll toggle the pre-count on and off, even when this window is not open. And we see this little icon here. You can do it by clicking on this icon or by using Shift-C. And then we can use O to toggle pre-roll on and off. And again, you can do it using this button here. So not important to actually have the window open once your initial sounds are set. Now, I want to talk about, in the console view, adjusting the volume of the metronome. So here, I'm going to enable the view of the output channels. And on these output channels, we have this dedicated metronome button. So I can click this. If I want to, let's say, have my performers hear the click, maybe the ones using headphones 2 don't want the click, but the ones using headphones 1 do want it. I can simply toggle them on and off for each of the selected outputs. And then as well, we have this volume here for the click that we can customize and set for each of the individual outputs. So some simple but useful and important shortcuts that you'll probably use often. So get to know them, get them under your fingers. C toggles the metronome on and off. Shift-C will toggle pre-count on and off. O will toggle the pre-roll on and off. And we use the asterisk on the numeric keypad to engage record. All right, I'm ready to record my first MIDI part, but before I do that, I kind of got this song set up nicely. I want to save this as a user template so I can use it in the future as a starting point for new songs. I got my headphone routing the way I like. I got a nice track preset called up. I got the click and the metronome set with my custom sounds the way I like it. I'm going to hit F3 to close the console, and I'm going to save it as a user template. And I've got my customizations here. I've got complete. All of my items are available. And just so you know, I got rid of those user unsaved ones here by simply navigating to them. And then once I had those selected, I can hit delete. And these are factory ones, which are permanent, but the user ones are able to be deleted. So with that done, I'm going to go under File, and I'm going to go Save as Template. And let's just give it a good name. And I can give it a subtitle, description, an icon, even if I want. And it's going to save it to the default location that I have set up. So let's go OK. And that's done. So now if I just go back momentarily to my start page, we'll see if I go under my new templates, under User, we're going to see there's that new template that I have and I can use in the future. I'm going to click Cancel and go back to here. So here's my bass sound. And to record, I'm basically just going to start playing and hit record. So I'll position my playhead maybe bar 4. I don't like starting right at bar 1. Maybe there's a pickup going in, or I want to add something later, a little drum fill. I like leaving a bit of empty space. So I'm going to simply hit my asterisk key, which is my shortcut for record, and start playing. And with the pre-count set for 1 bar, as we can verify here, I'll get 1 bar of count in before the playhead starts moving. Okay, a little rough. I'm not sure what I'm going to keep, what I'm not going to keep, but I'll double click here to hear playback. Okay, so the timing is really rough with the click. Thankfully, we can fix the timing of these kinds of performances through a process called quantizing, which means we can adjust the timing of the notes to conform to the subdivisions in the grid. I'm going to click this Q button to call up the quantize panel, and we can quantize to different rhythm values. We can round off all the notes so they fall in quarter notes, eighths, sixteenths, and so on. And in this case, I think I need sixteenths, and we can have them be straight sixteenths, triplets, even subdivided by 5s or 7s, and so on. And I'm going to introduce some swing as well, because I want it swung a little bit. Let's try something like that and see. Now, we also have advanced parameters like quantizing the start and the end position of notes. And I'm not so concerned about the length. We can have them all the same length as well. But the start position I want quantized by 100%, or I can go by less to preserve some of the feel. I can quantize the velocity, how hard each note is, and even a range, meaning if some notes are fairly close to the subdivisions, I can leave those unaffected, but I'm going to put the range all the way up. And we can even save some templates for quantizing so we can, quickly have some presets to call up. But let's try this and see if it works. So with this event selected, I'm going to hit apply, and the notes shifted subtly. And let's hear what that sounds like. Much better. So a bit of swing. Okay, I don't like it at bar 12. I kind of made a mistake there, and I want to replace that part. Now, there are a couple of different things we can do. First thing is I want to save this as a quantized preset, so I don't have to set all these parameters exactly this way again. So I'm just going to hit plus here to store the preset, and I'll give it a name, subtle 16th note swing. And there it is there, available to me. So I want to replace bar 12. Now, you recall we talked about setting loops based on selections. I can do that, but I can also drag here and create the loop points. And when the loop function is off, in other words, when it's not highlighted blue, and you recall we get to it from that or the / key command, when it's off, it acts as a kind of left and right locator for punching in and out. So I want to punch in and out just at that bar. So I'm going to set that there. Now I'm also going to open up the record panel, and that's Option Shift R, and it brings up a bunch of recording modes and options that we have here. And I want to turn on what's called replace mode, meaning that when I get to here and I start recording again, it's going to replace what's there rather than add to it. So the idea now is I can position the playhead, and I'm going to engage what's called auto punch. We get to it from this button over here, and it lights up red, and the shortcut is I. So with that enabled, I can start playback from wherever I want. I can hit record. It'll start playing, but only drop into record where I have this set for the in point and that set for the out point. So with it positioned here, I'm going to hit record. I can listen, and it'll play back, but only drop in and out of record at these points. Good. So now let's listen back to that. Okay, I think I'm going to have to quantize it again. So with that selected, I've got my preset here. I'm just going to hit apply, and let's listen to that now. Perfect. So we've seen that we can set this loop range, which acts as locators when it's off, by dragging here by selection and key command, but we can also assign it numerically here in these fields. And I can type in a value. Let's say I'll type 14, hit tab, 3, hit tab again, go through the various fields, and maybe I want it to end. I'm going to hit shift tab to go back, maybe at bar 15 on the second 16th note, and then just hit tab to go to that. And you can see that it updates based on the values that I've set there. So 3 different ways to set the loop range. Let's review. Quantizing is used to correct the timing, the placement of notes, and it's based on the subdivision of bars and beats in the timing grid. And in addition to timing, we can also use quantizing to conform the length of notes or the velocity of notes. And we use the quantize panel in the toolbar to set and store different quantized values and presets. And once they're set, we can just use the shortcut Q to quantize any newly recorded events. We use the Autopunch function to automatically drop in and out of record at specified points, and we enable the Autopunch function with the key command I. And we can use the loop range when loop is disabled to act as locators for the start and end points of Autopunch. And we can set the loop range by dragging in the ruler, or by basing it on selection, or by setting it numerically at the bottom of the window. And we use the record panel to set the recording mode. There's some additional ones we're going to explore, but so far we use it to determine if new recordings are going to be added to or replace existing events. And the shortcut to call that up is Shift-Option-R. All right, I've used Save As to save a new version, and I've named it 10 instrument recording modes. And I'm going to provide these song files for each of the videos from this point on. So I want to record some drums now. I'm going to show you another way to load an instrument. In the instrument browser here, we can navigate to whatever we want, and I'm going to use Impact, and I can even get into the specific presets of Impact if I want. But for now, I'm just going to take the Impact instrument and just drag it into the list here, and it's going to create a new track and a new channel. Let me just close, and it opens the interface, but let me just close it for the moment. And I'm going to hit F3 to open the console, and we'll see here's the new track and here's the new channel. So with this done, I'm going to click this icon to open the instrument editor, and I can choose a preset, and it's fun to go through them all, but I'm going to choose this one that I like, and it's got some good sounds that I want to record. So those are the sounds I want to use, and I'm going to just close this up. I don't want to get too deep into the actual instrument itself, but those are the sounds I want to record. So I want to try adding one part at a time. So I'm going to set this loop range for, let's say, 4 bars. I want to have a 4-bar pattern, and I'm going to hit my / key to enable loop. So what I want to do is loop record, and each time I want to add on a different element. The first time maybe I'll record kick and snare, then the next time maybe I'll add the hi-hats, and the next time I'll add some shaker. So I can set that and it'll loop through, but we have to be cognizant of the recording modes here. I'm going to use what's called record mix, so that when it's going through each of these cycles, it's going to add on what I'm playing each new time, rather than recording to separate takes or replacing. This is kind of a overdub recording where I'm adding. So when replace is on, it'll replace each time. And with that off, it's overdub, where it'll add each time. And with record mix, it's going to add it all into the same take, rather than recording additional takes. So with that done, I'm just going to open my metronome settings and show you another kind of way of working. I have both pre-count and pre-roll disabled, and now I can just position this where I want, like for example here, and then when I hit record, I'll get the 1 bar here of the click before the music starts. So that's just another way of working with the click. Now, another thing I want to do is I want to use what's called input quantize. I know that I want my drums to be quantized to these values here. So we have this input quantize function, and we can also get to it up here. And that means that it'll quantize to the values that I have set here on input, so I don't have to then manually go in and do that extra step of quantizing the notes after the fact. So let's try this. Okay, I'm going to hit stop, and there's my part where I did kick and snare first, then hi-hats, and then shaker, and it should all be quantized. And I'm just going to hit F3 to open the console and adjust my volumes a little bit. And here I've got independent faders for the kick drum here, so I can control that separately from the snare, and then the hi-hat and the shaker, so I can pan them and adjust the levels as I want. Now, let's look at another scenario. I'm going to try the next section. Let me just drag over here. I'm going to just try 2 bars. And in this case, I'm not sure what I want to try. I want to try some different ideas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave input quantize on, and I'm going to go to record takes instead of record mix. And I want to try some different patterns. So here I want to open up my metronome settings because I do need some pre-roll in this case. So I want 1 bar, and I'm going to make the metronome active, and then try out some different ideas. Okay, I hit stop, and they were all quantized on input, and I have several different takes that I can choose from and audition. So here's take 1. Take 2. Take 3. Kind of fun. I think I'm going to go with that one. And I want to add some hi-hats in there. So what I'm going to do is go back to record mix and just add in some hi-hats and just add it in right now. Good, and that should be blended in now. Cool. Now what I'm going to do is turn off loop with the / key, and I'm just going to copy this, so I'll have that 2 bars repeating, and then I'm going to option drag this, copy this for the next part there, and just trim it at the end. So I have a drum part now for this whole arrangement where this middle B flat section has this alternate drum part, and then I have this drum part reverting back when it comes back to the original bass line. And in the next video, we'll look at the takes to layers feature. I want to look at using layers in this video. Now, I've been listening back, and first thing is I want to bump the tempo up, and since this is just a static tempo, I can do it right here in the transport down low. And I decided I don't really like this drum part on this alternate section here. So I could delete it and record a new part, and that would be fine, but I'm not sure. I might like it. I might want to revert. I want to use an alternate layer so that I can have the option to toggle back and forth. Now, there's a couple of ways of setting this up. I'm going to hit F4 to open the inspector, and we'll see that this layer is called Impact 1. But under this menu, I can go Add Layer or Duplicate Layer, and that's what I'm going to do here, and I'll just give it a quick name. And now we see 2 layers, and they're duplicate, they're identical for the moment. Now we can hide or reveal the additional layers with this little icon here. So right now we're just seeing that 1 layer, and I can switch between them like this. Now, of course, they're duplicate right now. So let me go to New Drums, and I'm just going to delete this part here. That's the part I want to replace. So if I go to my original layer, I'll have that there. And if I go to New Drums, I have that empty gap, or I can go there and display both of them that way. So I'm going to go to the layer that I've created the gap in, and I'm going to record there. So let me just double check my metronome settings. I'm not sure how I've left them. And I have pre-roll on for 1 bar, and that's great. So I can hear a bar, and I'm just going to press C to turn it on, and let's record a new part. Okay, that's good. Those 2 bars are fine. I'm just going to option drag to copy that. and I'm going to add some hi-hat on top. So again, let me just check here that I'm in record overdub mode. So I want replace to be off, and I'm not doing any loop recording. I'm just going to record directly on top of it and add into that. So in fact, I'm going to delete this because I'll overdub onto this and then copy it. Okay, so I should have everything in there now. Now I realize I didn't have input quantize on, so I can select that and I can just use the shortcut Q. And if I right click on here, I'll see that in my recent items, I have quantize. I can see it there or just use Q, but it's under the event menu, and under here we have quantize. So let me just use it from here, and that should be corrected now. Great, and I'm just going to option drag that to copy it. Now I want to add another part on, so I'm going to take the instrument presence, and I can drag it even right to the work area here. It doesn't have to be to the track list, and it's going to create that new track and channel and open up the interface for me. And I'm just going to select one of the presets here that I've checked out and know that I like, and it's under clavinet, and I like this. I like the wah clavinet. I think I'm going to use that one. So with that selected, let me just click away and then close that up. And I'm just going to lower the volume a little bit. And I want to record to layers now. So I want to record over these first few bars. And again, you can zoom by doing that. I meant to click up here in the pencil area, but that's what happens. And with that, I'm going to enable the loop by hitting the /. And down here, I'm going to enable input quantize again. And I'm going to use takes to layers. And with record takes enabled, it'll move the notes from each take onto its own layer. All right. All right, I'm going to hit stop, and all of the layers have been opened up by default, and I can again easily click here to hide them. So I can use this to move between the different takes and listen to them. Now there are more elegant ways, but that is one way to do it, and I can rename any of them or remove any of the ones I don't like. Let's just listen. I can also open them up like that, where we can take the best bits of each and cobble them together or comp them together, to use the right language, into one new take. And we'll look at doing that in the next video. So we've got these 4 different layers. Now, if I close this up, I can see the layers here, and I can right click and I can easily select the takes that I have. And I can also simply go here and choose the layers that I want from here to audition. And that's great for going through them one at a time. But let's look at another type of workflow. So I'm going to open this up. And what we can do is listen. And this top one is kind of an active layer. And we can promote any of these, in this case, 4 takes to the top layer. So for example, if I press this up here, this is going to play take 1. If I press this, now it's playing take 2 up there. There's 2, and then there's take 1, 3, and 4. There's take 3 up there. There's take 4 up there. You can see the order switching. I'll put 1 back up, and we're back to our original layers. But we can comp together the best bits of each one, and I'm going to just click here to zoom a little bit so we can get a little bit more resolution. And when we're in this expanded layer view, we get this kind of promote tool, where we can select something like this, and it'll get promoted to this composite or active layer at the top. Now I'm just going to hit Command Z to undo, and I want to show you another way of approaching doing this because it can get confusing with a bunch of patchwork selections and then that reflected on top. What I'm going to do is create a new layer here, and I can do it from here, of course, as you saw me do in the last video. But we can also do it by right-clicking on the track, and I can get into layers over here. And I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to name it. And there it is, an empty layer called Comp at the top. So now I can listen to the best bits and promote them to the top and create my composite over there and leave these 4 intact. So let me just make a selection of these first, or let's say just this first bar, and it's promoted it on top there. But with that selection, I'm going to hit Shift-P so that we set our loop range for that. So I've got my 4 layers in this original layer, which I don't really need anymore. So I'm going to right-click on that one, and I'm just going to go Remove Layer. So now I want to audition this first bar. So what I can do is hit play. I'm going to select this first one, and I can hit the S key command to solo it, select it, and then move down, hit S, move down, hit S, and so on. Now take 2, take 3, take 4. Okay, so I've listened to them all. I think I like this bit over here from that. So that's going to get promoted up there. And then I like this bit over here. Now that'll get promoted. So let's listen to our active comp now. Now let's listen in context. And then I can continue the same process. Let's just set the next bar like that, or the next 2 bars like that, and we can do the same thing. Now there's a preference I want to show you that could make this a bit easier. If you're doing a lot of this, you got a lot of tracks to go through and or a lot of layers to go through. I'm going to hit Command, comma for the preferences, and in advanced under console, we have solo follows selection. We just hit apply. And now, let's say I'm going to select maybe this and hit S. All I need to do is move my selection and it'll automatically change the soloing. Take 1. Take 4. Take 3. Okay, so I think I like this beginning part. So with this tool, I just need to click and drag and select like that, and it promotes it. And then I think I'm going to take 3 from here, and that'll promote it. So now let's listen to the whole thing. I'll just collapse the layers so we're not distracted by the view, and we can listen to the whole part and make sure it works. Good. So I'm happy with all that. Now, if you don't like seeing all of these individual kind of regions or events, I can just select them all and I can merge them together. Now, there's a couple of different ways I can do it. I can bounce it as audio, but because we're dealing with MIDI, I'm going to right click, and from here I can choose under Event, Merge Events, and boom, I got one new take. So now let's just do a bit of cleanup here. I'm going to zoom a little bit. Talking about merging events, let me turn off the loop area over here. We have the B section that happens here, and then I come back to this E flat minor. So I think I want to extend this by 2 more bars. I want to have this kind of 4-bar section, then this other 4-bar section, and then a repeat of the first 4 bars. So I'm going to select these 2 bars to copy over. Now, we haven't spoken about the tools yet, but when we have these tools selected all together here, we get a Smart tool, and there are different functions depending on the height, horizontal or vertically rather, and also horizontally front and end of the events. They all have slightly different functions, but when I'm in the upper part and I get this crosshair, I can click and drag and make a selection, and I'm going to go down so I can select the bass track as well. And in this case, it's snapping to divisions based on the snap mode that I have here. Again, we haven't spoken about that. We'll get into editing in later videos, but it's called adaptive, and we can have it snap specifically to bars or to events or quantized values, grid, etc. But for now, that's fine. So with that selected, I can position in the lower part where I get the arrow key and hold down Option and then drag that across. And now I've got a copy of it. And then I'm going to take this, what I just comped together and merged, I'm going to Option drag that. So that repeats as well. So now I have this sort of A section, an alternate section, and then a repeat of the A section. And I think I'm going to, again, click here, shift click, so I can select those, and then I'll just use the shortcut for the merging the events that we saw in the menu, G, and those are merged now, so I have kind of a solid block. And then maybe here, where this alternate section happens, I'm going to double click. I want to split that, so I want to have access to these 3 blocks separately. So now we can just give a quick listen coming out of this bridge section into here. And speaking of merging, maybe I'll shift click those and merge those just so these sections are kind of all together in one block for each section. So we can listen to the end of this and then going back to the recapitulation of this first section. So regarding the recording modes, we can use take to layers with the record takes setting to move the contents of each take created when we're recording in loop mode to its own layer below the current track. Now, if we use the record mix option instead, then a new layer is created each time recording is started and stopped, and it contains all the notes from the entirety of the most recent recordings. We can use the key command S to solo layers, and we can also use it just to solo tracks. And when the Smart tool is active, we can click and drag in the upper part to make a range-based selection, click with the arrow tool in the bottom to select the whole event, and we get a trim tool at the left and right borders for trimming. And we can use the shortcut G to merge selected events. We'll continue with more in the next video. Now, in my excitement to show you all these new features, I haven't really been following best practices in terms of work habits. It's good to name the tracks first so that your events that are created have meaningful names rather than just impact, presence, and so on. So I want to correct that in this video, and I want to look at the new icon features. So here, this is my track preset, as you'll recall, and I think I'm just going to double click and rename this track Synth Bass, since I don't need the longer name. And I'm going to name this one Drums. And I'm going to name this one over here by double-clicking clav or clavinet. Now, I also want to name the actual events, so I can right-click over here, and here I can actually change the color as well if I want to, although I don't want to do that. I'm going to go under Event and rename events, and I can call this Bass A section, for example. And then maybe I'll right-click here, and I'm going to go rename events. It's now in my recent items, and I'll call that Bass B section. And I'll just go through these real quick. I'm going to hit F3 to open the console view, and we'll see that the bass and drums and clav have gotten renamed. But as you recall, I have these multiple outputs. And as you'll recall, I have the kick coming out of this one, and then the snare from there, hi-hats, and then the shaker. I want to have the kick on a separate output, not the main track channel strip. So what I'm going to do is open Impact. I'm going to double click there to open it, and here's the bass drum, that one there. And I'm just going to go here and select one of the unused outputs. We'll go with 4, and then there it is. So I can close that up now, and I'm going to rename these. And I can use Shift-Tab to go back and Tab to go forward. I think I want to give all of these drums the same color, so I'm going to click there to select that and shift-click this so they're all selected, and then click in the color field over here and maybe give them all that unique color. Now, we also have icons here in Studio 1.6, and we can get to them either in the track view or the inspector or in the console view. So, for example, I'll show you both. Let's say the synth bass, I'm going to select that. With this wrench icon, we can choose what's visible, and I'm going to enable icon, and now I have this new field that's opened up at the bottom here, and I can option click and get a selection of icons to choose from. So maybe I'll go to keyboards, and I can choose something that looks synthy or whatever's relevant for me, and that's fine for now. I'm going to right click here for the drums and maybe I'll get a drum set icon, and then each of the channels in their corresponding instrument. Now let me hit F3 to close this up. And in this arrange area, we have a separate set of visibility options. So I'm going to enable track icons over here, and we'll now see those. And for here, I can click. I don't need to option click, just regular click, and I can bring up the same palette of options, and there I'll choose clavinet. Now, when the inspector is open, you also see the icon field at the bottom here, so we can click there and get the same palette of options if you prefer working that way. And I'm just going to hit F4 to close that up. And when we're in the console, F3 to open that, and we're in the new channel editor view, we get the icons there as well, where we get the same options. So you can access the new icons in the console by going to console options and enabling the channel icons. And then in the new field that becomes visible, option click or alt click in the field, and your palette will come up where you can select an icon. And in the main tracks area, enable track icons from the track options menu, and the same palette will be available. And it's also accessible at the bottom of the inspector and in the channel overview window in the channel editor. We'll continue with more in the next video. Now, there's a way to create parts using step record for non-real-time input. It's great if you're playing fast parts, maybe they're too hard technically. And I'm going to hide the record panel. We don't need it at the moment. You'll recall the option, or the command rather, was Option-Shift-R to toggle it. And we can also get to that from under the View menu here for the record panel. Now, I'm going to take an instrument, my tie, and just drag it here and create a new channel and track. And I'm going to call up a preset here that I like under Poly. A nice short sound like that. So what I'm going to do is create an instrument part here. Now, these are called parts and they contain events. But with the cursor here, I can go under Event, Instrument Parts, and create a new instrument part. And the shortcut is Command P. And there it's on the new track. And I'm just going to stretch it out maybe for 2 bars like that. So I'm going to open the editor, which is F2, as you'll recall. I'm just going to make it a bit bigger. And we have the step record mode here that we get to with this button. So it's really intuitive. We turn it on or off like this. And I suggest leaving it off until you're actually ready to use it, because you can accidentally hit a note on your keyboard and enter a part. But we basically choose the note values that we want to enter, either a whole note, half note, quarter, eighth, 16th, and so on. They can be straight or triplet or quintuplet, septuplet, etc. And we can also have the option to follow the quantized value, which is interesting. And that's what I'm going to use for this, because as you recall, I have the custom quantized value that I saved here that has a bit of swing to it. So I want it to conform to the rest of the timing of the rest of the instrument. So I'm going to use this on this middle section here, which is a B flat type of chord. So it's pretty simple. We just hit a note on our keyboard, one or more notes, and it'll enter the note on that step, and the position or cursor will advance to the next increment based on the value you have set here. So if you want different rhythms, you can enter a couple of notes, change the value, enter another note, change the value, and so on. Let me start by just hitting a B flat, and I'm going to hit enable, of course. So there's entered the 16th note, moved ahead, and I have the option to go back, and that'll erase it. But I'll enter it again just to show you. And I can put in a rest, and then maybe hit a couple of notes. I'm going to hit like that, and then maybe I'll put another rest and do like that. And then maybe I'll put a rest in, and I'm going to try dotted value. And that again, and then maybe I'll go back to regular, put a rest in there, and try this. And then maybe a rest. So let's hear what that sounds like. Okay. So it works okay. I think there's some delay built into that preset that I don't quite like with the dotted quarter notes. So I think I'm going to try it again. I'm just going to grab over there, select them, and hit delete. And then I'll position the key or the cursor going back by hitting Shift with the minus to go back and forward by a bar. You'll remember that command. And let's try it again. I'm going to go to 16ths and we'll try it. Just kind of randomly doing some rests and parts. And then we'll try quarter note or maybe an eighth note. And then we'll go back to that. All right, and let's hear what that sounds like. Nice. I think I'm just going to repeat that. So you recall I have the trim tool there, and I'm going to trim this down to 1 bar, and then I can repeat it like that. And maybe the second time I'm going to just get rid of that, so I have it a little bit different. And then I'll repeat it again for the next 2 bars. So again, let me select that, and you recall our Command G to mix down the selection. So now I have that as 1 song part. I'm going to Option drag that, and now I have that duplicated there, and there's that part for this section. And I think I'm going to loop it for a moment, and I'm just going to hit my / key to put that on. And I want to open the instrument editor, and I think maybe I'm going to try filtering it a bit differently. I didn't loop it exactly evenly. Okay, something like that's got a little bit of a different quality. So that's step record. We'll continue with more in the next video. Retrospective recording is a fantastic feature that allows you to capture your performance even if you're not in record mode. So let me continue building my little arrangement. I decided that I think these first 4 bars, I want to repeat them twice. So I'm just going to rubber band select all these to select all these parts. This is just kind of simple editing 101. I'm dragging them over. And again, the movement is quantized based on this snap mode. And I'm just going to select those again and Option click these with the cursor down in the lower portion. So it's the pointer tool, so I can get that. So we're going to hear that twice, then this B section, and then this C section. Now I think I want to continue this. I'm going to loop this. I'm going to tweak the arrangement later, of course, but just going to continue the drum groove, and I want to try some ideas on my tie. So I'm just going to start playback from there. Oh my God, that was great. Oh no, I wasn't in record mode. Well, we can always capture it using retrospective recording. The default key command for that is Shift with the asterisk key, and you'll recall the asterisk key on the numeric keypad is the default recording command. So Shift with asterisk will capture it, and it follows all of the parameters we have set in the record panel, so it'll be quantized on input. And let's just listen. So that sounds great. Oh my God, I think that was even better. But wait, I wasn't even playing. You can still capture it. I'm going to hit Shift asterisk again, and it'll respect the timing between the notes. So I may have to go in and change the placement, but it basically has grabbed the idea. Now, retrospective recording is on by default, but you can turn it off if you want. I'm going to hit Command, to open up the preferences. And in the Advanced tab on MIDI, we have Enable Retrospective Recording. And if you want to change the key command, of course, you can always do that as well. If we go to General and then Keyboard Shortcuts, I'll type in Retrospective, and there it is. Recall Retrospective Recording, and that's the default key command, but of course, it can always be altered. Now, you can also recall a recording like that from the inspector with this retrospective recording button. Now, I'm going to click it now. Nothing's going to happen because there's nothing in the buffer. And this is optional here. It's here by default because we're in the customized all set or complete set of all our view options here in the customization. Actually, it's user defined because I was doing some experimenting, but it's basically the complete set. And of course, I can right click in the toolbar here and go customize. And then under inspector, there's retrospective recording that we can enable or disable if we want to have it off. And by making that little modification, I'll right click here again. You'll see I've created another user defined set in addition to the factory ones. So I could save that as a user defined set if I want, although I don't really want to or care to because I was just doing it for demonstration purposes. So just to show you how to do this under edit customization, I'm going to go here and go delete. And yes, I'm going to delete that and this one as well. And now we're back to the factory defaults. We'll continue with more in the next video. We're back to our old friend, the record panel, and you'll recall it's Shift Option R to view it, or under the view menu here, record panel. Now, note repeat. It allows us to hold a single note down and it'll repeat based on a variety of criteria and settings that we have here. Now, what it's generally intended for is something like a trap hi-hat beat where you're going from eighth notes to 16th to triplets and you're ramping the speed up and down. It makes it really easy to program those cool parts. I'm going to demonstrate it on a bass part. So here with this off, I'm going to hold whole notes down in this new section that we recorded just to show you what it sounds like as is without it. Those are the root notes I want to record. So that's what I want to do. Now, I can turn it on, first of all, just by pressing the active button. And these are kind of the simple controls. We get this wrench icon to bring up some more advanced options, which we're going to get to in a moment. But let me close that. So just with it on, it'll repeat the note at a value that we set in this pop-up here, and it defaults to, let's say, 16ths. Like that, or we can choose any of these other values and their triplet variations, or we can have it follow the quantized value. And as you'll recall, I have a little bit of a swing setting to the 16th notes. And so on. Now, let's open up this wrench icon and look at some of the things we can do. So first of all, we can quantize the note input. So even if I don't hit my first note directly on, it'll quantize it on input, which is important for this type of rhythmic thing. And it can also optionally capture aftertouch or not. Now this is interesting, the gate parameter. I'm going to leave this at 100, which is the default. That's what it should have been at. And you'll hear the bass sound is kind of got a bit of a long release. Like that. So I can shorten the gate time and that'll make it more staccato sounding. You can hear that bit of swing in there. You can go really short. I think for this sound, something around there will work nicely. And so on. And I can hit my shift with the asterisk for retrospective recording if I want to capture it, and there's my part. I can turn this off and it's already recorded like that. And so on. So let me delete that and show you some of the other options. We have single mode here, which, and this is the idea for a hi-hat type part, where no matter what pitch I play on the keyboard, it's going to trigger the same note, but at different speeds based on the different speeds that we have on these notes that are laid out. Quarter note triplet, eighth note triplet, and then the octave lower are the different divisions. So I can do something like this. So you can get those kind of buzz effects for, let's say, a hi-hat part, and you just set this to trigger the note you want. And this you can use to offset the range of where these are falling. So depending on the size of your keyboard controller, maybe you want it lower or higher, but that's what that does. Now, another approach is to use the key remote mode. Here, all the pitches work. And the speed is determined by these kind of key switch type notes. And again, you can use the bass octave to determine where you want them to be. So I can trigger, let's say that I just hit quarter notes. So you can do that by playing the pitches in your right hand and triggering the speeds in the left hand, or vice versa, depending how you set the range. Now let me go back and just record the regular short 16th notes, and then we'll look at the note erase function. Okay, and again, Shift asterisk will capture it. And now when I turn on Note Erase, it deactivates active. They're kind of mutually exclusive. It's one or the other. So with Note Erase on, any notes that are played during a recording pass erases existing notes of the same note value. So by selectively erasing some of the notes, you can create interesting syncopated patterns. And a little footnote, you need to use record mix mode for this to work. We'll continue with more in the next video. So far, we've been looking at recording instrument parts on instrument tracks, but let's look at setting up to record live audio. And what I mean by live audio is audio recorded through a microphone, like a vocal or drums or an electric guitar plugged into your interface, something that's not software. Now we need to create a new track, and we've been working with instrument tracks, but we need audio tracks. So there's a few different ways of creating tracks. We can hit T to bring up this new tracks window or add tracks window, and we can select audio track here instead of instrument, which is what we have been selecting. I'm just going to hit cancel just to show you a couple of other ways. Up on the track menu here, we can go to add tracks, and that calls up the same window. And finally, we can right click under here and go add tracks, and that'll bring it up. And I'm just going to hit cancel again. Now it's going to add the track after the currently selected track. So if I create it now, it's going to create it after synth bass. So I think I'm going to go here. I want it after this in the list, and here's another case of me not naming tracks in advance. And then I'll quickly just shift click in the bottom with the pointer tool to select these, and I can right click in the name field, double click and name them. And now I'm going to call up T, and let's look at creating a new audio track. So I'm going to record some shaker first just to give you a simple example, but I'm going to have a guitar player in later today, and we'll record some live guitar as well. So we can decide how many tracks we want to create. I'm just going to create one for now. We can choose a color manually or auto color, and if auto color is off, we can choose from the color palette, but I'll just go with that for now. We can choose mono or stereo. We can choose an effects chain, so I can load it up with a bunch of effects processing to start with, which is a great shortcut. We can set the input, and you'll recall in my multiple input and output audio interface, I named some of my inputs for my drum mics, but in this case right now, I'm just going to put input 1, which is my vocal mic that I'm speaking into, and we'll use that to record some shaker. And then the output I can route to my main stereo outputs, and you'll recall I also set up some headphone outputs, and we'll look at setting up a headphone mix. And we also have something called side chains, which is a little more advanced. We'll look at that later in the series. And I can also optionally load a track preset, like for example, here in audio, maybe when I have the guitar player over, I'll choose an electric guitar preset, which will automatically call up an amp and an effects plugin for me. But for now, let me just hit cancel for that and just bring this back up and do this again. Shaker 1, auto color, mono, no effects preset. Input 1 is fine for now. My default output routing, and I'm going to click 1. Now I can also optionally click ascending. So for example, if I was going to set up drum mics and I wanted these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mics, I could set it to there, put the count to 5 and go ascending, and it would create the 5 tracks with all the inputs I need. But for now, I'm just going to go there. And same thing with outputs. We can create multiple ones ascending from wherever we select. So let's just click OK, and there's my new track. Now, I'm just going to drag this open a bit to expand it so you can see all the fields available here. We can set the input here if we do need to change it. We get that same menu there. And this is for assigning groups. Useful, again, if we're recording multiple mics, like let's say a drum kit, we can have them in a group so they all act together. We'll look at that later in the series as well. Now, if I hit F4, I'll open the inspector, and we can get to the tempo mode. And this is important. You'll recall that when we set up our defaults in song setup, we have here stretch audio files to tempo, and that's enabled. So any new tracks or new audio tracks that are created like this one, by default have the tempo mode set to time stretch. But our options are don't follow, where if we have tempo changes, the audio will just remain as is. I can set it to follow, and when we do this, the start position of audio events are on the selected tracks because this is a per track function. So on the selected tracks will be adjusted with tempo changes so that the event stays in sync with the bar and beat position. So the start position is adjusted, but the length is not affected, so it won't conform to any new tempos. Whereas time stretch will allow the audio to be dynamically stretched so that the event's start and end times stay in sync with their bar and beat position. So the length and the internal timing is stretched or compressed, but the pitch will remain the same. In other words, it's going to follow tempo changes. Now, to record on audio tracks, we need to record enable tracks, and we can do that by pressing this button over here. And we can also use the shortcut R to do that. And a handy little tip, if you press Option or Alt on the keyboard and then click the Record Enable button, you'll both record enable the track and disarm other record enable tracks. And if you're recording multiple tracks, you can select the multiple tracks and then just click the R button and it'll record enable any of them. Right now, of course, we have just the one track, but it'll work on multiple ones. So Option Alt click to record enable this one and toggle the other one's out of record enable status. Now, monitoring, if you want to monitor the signal, let's say we had a guitar plugged in here or my microphone like we do, I can press this button and it'll monitor the signal even when we're not in record enable mode. And the shortcut for this is U, and that'll record enable it, or rather monitor enable it. And same thing, we can Option or Alt click on that monitor enable button to simultaneously engage monitoring and disengage it on the other tracks. And for software instruments, you'll see when I select that they both have record enable and monitoring enabled. The same commands work. I can turn off record and software monitoring, and I can press U to just turn the monitoring off, but you generally want them on so you can hear what you're playing as soon as you select the track. Whereas here, in case you're plugging a guitar in or out or a microphone in or out, you want to deliberately record enable it. You don't want it that way by default. And I want to draw your attention to a preference, Command, comma, we'll open that up. And in the Advanced tab in Audio, you want to have Record Tempo Information to Audio Files enabled. It should be on by default, but in case it's not, turn it on, and that way your time stretching function will work because it needs to be able to read the tempo information within the file in order to stretch or compress it. And we can also right-click and disable these tracks. So in case you have a lot of processing, a lot of plugins, and it's taking up a lot of power. Maybe you're not using it. Maybe you're trying out a bunch of different alternate, guitar parts, for example, and you're not using a few of them. You can always disable like that and save some of your CPU power. Right click again and enable. So for the tempo mode options, you can select do nothing where your audio remains as is regardless of tempo changes. If you choose follow, the start position of the audio events on the selected track will be adjusted, but the length won't change. And if you select time stretch, then your audio will conform to tempo changes. We can record enable audio tracks by pressing the button on the track or the shortcut R, and you can select multiple tracks and record enable any of them, and they'll all be record enabled. And you can use Option or Alt as a kind of toggle to record enable the selected track and take the others that are in record enable mode out of record enable mode. Same thing with monitoring. You can press the button on the track or U, and you can Option or Alt click the button to disengage monitoring on other tracks at the same time. And you can right click on tracks to disable them if they're unused or unnecessary to save CPU resources. We'll continue with more in the next video. I want to talk about setting up what's called a CueMix in this video. Now, when we're recording the MIDI instruments, we can just listen through our monitors and play and record, and we don't need to worry about leakage into a microphone. However, when we're recording live audio like vocals, or in this case, shaker, or to be more specific, maracas, that's what I'm using, we need to monitor through headphones so that the music we're listening to doesn't leak into the microphone and get picked up along with the source that we're recording. So we need to set up a headphone mix. Now, a lot of simple audio interfaces will have a headphone jack. You can plug in headphones and they'll just mirror the main mix. And if that's the case, you can just plug in your headphones, put them on, mute your monitors or turn your volume down and record, and you're good to go. But for a more sophisticated setup, a lot of audio interfaces have multiple outputs, and you can create separate headphone mixes and route those to separate outputs on your audio interface and route those to multiple different headphone mixes. And that's what we want to do here. Now, you'll recall that in one of the earlier videos, I'm going to hit Command, comma to call it the preferences. In Song Setup, in the Audio I/O on the Output tab, we set these additional outputs set up, and I named them Headphone 1 and Headphone 2. Well, here I want to click this little field that says CueMix so that they'll be available to use for headphone mixes and CueMixes within the Studio 1.6 mixer. And the CueMixes are going to then be sent to my physical outputs 3 and 4 and then 5 and 6, and that'll feed my headphones. So I'm going to hit OK. And now when I hit F3 to open my console, if we expand, we can, first of all, drag this to expand the insert field. We can drag this to expand the send field. And we see sends here, which there aren't any, and we haven't spoken about those yet, and we will. But if we drag this up, we can see our CueMixes. So there are the levels to send to CueMix 1 and CueMix 2, or headphone 1, headphone 2. That'll arrive here, headphone 1, headphone 2. Now, we have a couple of options on this lock icon. We can turn that on or off, and if we click on this triangle, we see we have the option to lock to channel, which means that if I adjust fader levels here, that this gets mirrored. So if I bring this down, it's getting lowered in terms of what's going to headphone 1 and 2 as well. And same thing with panning. If I do this, the panning will get mirrored as well. And I'm going to command click to snap it back to center. And that's fine for a simple headphone mix. But sometimes you want to have different levels in the headphones. Like, for example, a vocalist might want to hear more of their vocals and less of, for example, the kick and the shaker or the clavinet. So to do that, we can set the levels independently by just dragging this horizontal slider, which acts as a volume or send amount, that how much is being sent to the headphones, headphone 1 and headphone 2. Maybe you have two players and one guy wants to hear less of the ARPs, one wants to hear more of the ARPs. That's how you set that independently. And when I move these, it automatically disabled the lock icon. And if I click the lock, it snaps back to mirror the fader setting. And again, you can see that that lock to channel and lock to pan become enabled or disabled when the lock icon's off. And we also have new in Studio 6, flip to fader. So I can now adjust this and use my fader to adjust the level. It sort of flips the controls of the sends, or in this case, CueMixes, to the fader. It's not going to adjust from here, which is great if you're using a control surface. And I'm just going to turn off the fader flip. And we also have options for that here as well. And to start with, I'm going to just leave everything locked, and we can play and record, and I'm going to hear in the headphones the same mix that I have set up here with my different fader levels. And if I decide I want more or less of something, I can easily make that adjustment there. And for the click, you'll remember that we have this over here where I can set my click volume. That's the amount of click that's going, in this case, to headphone 1 or headphone 2. So we have separate control over that. So with that done, I'm going to record enable my track, and we can hear the maracas now. And I'm going to record, and let me just record over these 4 bars, and I'm going to loop record. So I'm going to turn that on. And here, I'm not going to use takes to layers. I'll just record a couple of different takes. And you'll notice that this is also record enabled, and I want to take that out of record, but that would be great if I wanted to record some MIDI at the same time as audio, but I don't in this case. All right, so I have 2 takes there. I'm going to press R to take this out of record enable mode. And we can see the 2 over there. And if I right click there, we'll see that we have select take 1 or take 2. And let's just listen. I'm going to mute the drums for a moment. Bring the volume up. Right click. I'll choose take 2. And if I click there, I can also select take 1 or 2 right at the bottom like that. So they're both not bad. I think I'm going to go with take 2. And because I'm in time stretch mode, I can quantize it. So it'll match my swing value that I have here. So let me just hit apply, and you'll see the events move subtly if you look closely. You can see all the different audio bend markers and such, and we'll talk about all that in later videos. But for now, let's just listen. So that works great. Now you'll see that if I right click here, I can also have the option for these takes to unpack them to new tracks, or I can unpack them to new layers or to existing layers. And what I'm going to do is use merge events to just mix this down with the quantization. Let me just move the mouse away, and I'll hit G, and you'll see that happen. and boom, it's mixed it all down, and we can hear it now all quantized and nice and neat and everything in place. And there'll be no more takes. If I right click there, the takes are gone. It's all rendered into this one new event. I think I want to re-record the drums. Now that I have that shaker, I just copied these across before as a placeholder, but let me try some ideas and see what I can come up with. Okay, I think I like that. I'm just going to hit Shift with the asterisk, and that'll capture it. And I had input quantize on, so it should be good. And then maybe I'll repeat that section, and we'll continue with more in the next video. In this video, I want to do a bit of setup for the guitar player before he comes, and we're back at the start page. I just wanted to show you this, that we have our recent file list here, and in songs, I created that folder you'll recall earlier in the series, and I've been saving as, and I have all these versions in here, and I can right-click on any of these, and I can open with options, meaning I can load without plugins. It's a good troubleshooting without ARA support and so on. But what I can more importantly do is move it to a new folder if I want to create new folders, or an existing folder if other ones exist, show in Finder and so on. So I just wanted to show you how that works. Now I'm going to click this new 19 guitar record setup one that I have set up here. So what I want to do is first correct the mistake in my song setup audio IO routing. Now we can jump to there directly by hitting Command period, and that'll go right to the song setup page. But I'm just going to hit escape to close. Command comma brings up preferences. I'll hit escape to close. Command period jumps right there. So I incorrectly indicated that my guitar inputs are in 9 and 10, and they're actually in 11 and 12. So I can create two more, but I'm not going to be using my front panel inputs. So I'm just going to shift these over like that and just hit apply. So now when I use my one that's labeled guitar 1, it's actually going to take the signal from input 11 on my interface, which is what I want. So with that done, let me hit F3 to just close the console for a moment. I'm going to select here after the shaker track and call up my new tracks or add tracks window. And I'm going to call this guitar, and it's already named. I did it in advance. I'm just going to create one track for now, and auto color is fine. Mono is what I want. I'm not going to use an effects chain. And for the input here, I want to choose the one that I've named guitar 1. And output routing is fine like that. And I can use a track preset. So let me go into audio and look at what this electric guitar track preset does for me. It may or may not work. It calls up an icon. That's nice. Let's hit the F3 to open the console. And let's quickly add an icon here for the arpeggio and shaker. Great. So here, if I lift this up, I can see that it's called up the Ampire plugin for me. I can single click to see a few of the important controls, or double click to open the interface, which of course we'll need to tweak and set when the guitar player gets here. And it's also opened up analog delay. Now we may or may not like these. They may or may not work. And if they don't, and I'm just going to hide the output view here just to save a bit of room. If they don't, I can always go to my browser and go into effects and just load up other plugins. Maybe I want some distortion. I'm not sure yet. Now, it's quite likely the guitar player is going to want to listen to some reverb in his headphones. So what I want to do is set up what's called an effects channel for this. So I want to send a portion of the signal, and just make this bigger so we can see everything. We don't really need to see the CueMixes unless we want to make any adjustments. And we may, I don't know, but I'll bring it up here, I guess, for that one to have it ready. So for the sends, I want to send a portion of this signal to another destination, and then I can send a certain amount, like into reverb, where I want to blend, in this case, the electric guitar sound with a little bit of the reverb. So I can send just a smaller or lesser amount to the channel that has reverb on it. So there's a couple of different ways of setting this up. I'm going to show you an easy way. Here in the browser, I'm in effects, and here I'm viewing my PreSonus effects, and I'm going to go to reverb. I have one called room reverb, and we can even get to the actual settings here, and that's fine. I'm just going to jump here again. I don't know which is going to work, but I'm going to take fat plate for now. and just drag it into this send field. And before I release it, you see it says it's going to add an effects channel. So I've released it, and let me just close the browser now, and let's look at what it's done. It's going to close up this interface for a moment. So what it's done here is it's set up a send, and it's dialed up some send for me, and I can, of course, have more or less send here. And then it's created an effects channel with reverb on it. So I've got this room reverb here, and I can make my settings, which we'll do, of course, when the guitar player comes. But the idea is that the guitar player will now get processed with this amp higher and potentially delay sound, send to the headphone mix, and send some of it to this effects channel with reverb. And then on the reverb channel, I want that, of course, sent to the CueMix as well. And we've got a problem. We're not seeing the CueMix sends here. That's easily remedied by a preference, and it's in advanced, and on the console tab, CueMix mute follows channels. And now we have them available here. So I can send that reverb to the headphones, again, either locked to the amount that I have here or independently. Now let's just right-click there and add an effects icon there, and that's great. And we can also, when we're adjusting these levels, we can double-click and get an enlarged meter here. And we also get some options for the send. We can turn it on or off. We can make it pre-fader. We can lock the pan to channel. And what pre-fader means is, by default, it's post-fader, meaning if I adjust the level here, it's going to adjust the amount that's sent out through this send pathway. However, if it's pre-fader, and we can just click this little icon here to turn it pre-fader, and if I double-click and enlarge, you'll see that the pre-fader option is enabled now, and that'll turn it off, and it changes colors. If it's pre-fader, then the amount sent here remains constant regardless of where you have the level of the main channel that's feeding into it. And one other thing, I'm just going to click that and put it into post-fader mode, and I'm going to option or command click rather to snap that back. One other thing I want to point out is the visibility options. To view all of these items in the wrench icon, we need to make sure, for example, channel icons are enabled to view those. And here that we have sends and CueMix. Without that enabled, we won't be viewing them. And same thing for these other elements. We'll continue with more in the next video. I've got my buddy Maury Richmond here in the studio to record some electric guitar. Now I've got the input on this track set accordingly to the guitar input. And we made some adjustments within Ampire. We chose a different amp and cabinet. And I also called up the red light distortion before. And we're not using any of the analog delay right now. I've just bypassed it. So I'm going to have Maury record a little melody. We're going to have this first 4 bars act as a kind of intro, and then we'll have a melody over here, and then an alternate melody for this middle section, and then a recap of the melody again over here. So I'm going to have him listen to a couple of bars and then jump in with the melody here. I'm going to make sure to deselect the MIDI track out of record mode. And you'll notice that when I record arm this, the input monitoring is enabled at the same time, and that's due to a preference in the console tab. Audio track monitoring follows record, so it doesn't really make a big difference in this case, but you can have them independent or act together like that. And I'm also going to open up my metronome settings. I want to turn off pre-roll. I could have done it by key command, but I just want to show you what I'm doing. And I'm going to start playback from bar 6, so he has 2 bars. You good to go?
Good to go.
Great. Let's listen back. I'm going to go out of record mode. All right, sounds good. But I'm thinking maybe the second half here, we want to record a little bit of a variation rather than just repeating the phrase twice. I'm going to zoom a little bit here. Just listen from this B section. Okay, so I'm going to have you punch in just in this little hole here. So let's set a little range. And in this case, I want to turn off snap because I don't necessarily want this conforming to bars and beats. I want it right in that hole there. So I can click this and then we can move freely, and it's going to zoom a little bit more so that I can now drag right in this hole and we'll punch in and out. So use that as punch points. I'm going to turn on the auto punch over here and let's record arm. And now I'll give you some pre-roll. You can play or listen from the beginning of this B section and we'll just drop in on that little area. And I'm going to switch to record takes and takes to layers in case we want to try multiple ideas. Okay, that's great. Now, problem is my punch point wasn't perfectly set up and we cut off some of the earlier note. That's easily fixable. Let's just go in here and adjust that and we should be good to go. Let's listen to that composite. That works great. Okay, we're back and we have this last section and I want to have Maury try a couple of different ideas. I think I'm going to have some kind of solo on top, a keyboard solo of some kind, but I want some rhythm guitar underneath. So I want to loop record here and have him try some different ideas. We'll start playback from here. I've got the auto punch enabled so we can listen from here. It'll jump into record here and then loop over and over again. I'll probably extend it, but we'll just have them record over these 4 bars since it's the same chords. And again, I'm using takes to layers and record takes. So let's try. Great. We've got lots of ideas here, lots of different takes. I might split these out onto separate tracks. We can do some doubling and panning. And maybe if I extend this to be another 2 or 3 times, we can use different variations, different combinations. Got lots to work with. And I can hide or show the takes with this button over here. So I'll just collapse it for now and say thank you to Maury for laying down these great guitar parts.
All right.